Hey YouTube, welcome to my Ranger tactic setup. So in this video I'm going to go over the skill setups on all three different tactics, go through a party build, a PvP build, and more of a fun build for for personal preference. Hope you like it. Let's get into it. So starting off, we're going to go ahead with the group tactic. In this group tactic, I kind of play around with the ideas because we're still not unsure of the wording on some of the some of the skills. So starting off with the marksman tactic and the sniping tactic for my party max damage, possible, helping the party get damage and while outputting as much damage as I can myself. So starting here, we're going to increase skill damage when we switch. I still think this is one of the better things for just flat damage output, especially in a party. More or less, you're not going to be out of range. You're not going to need the increased range in a dungeon or anything like that. So personally, I think the damage overall is better. Going down on the side here, rapid fire. The crit is nice to have, and but in PvE, I think the skill damage will be more helpful overall. So I went with rapid fire, skill damage. Your normal chain in this would be launch into Mark of Fugi and into rapid fire. Switch stances to sniping stance. In here, I'm reducing physical defense by 2% for 5 seconds, which stacks. And then I'm able to reduce the defense as well by buffing it. And having that on for a party aspect is really helpful when you're reducing a boss's defense, especially. Next is Prudent Shot, increasing my fighting power for 3 seconds. Over the course of the buffs, I'm getting an additional 8% damage fighting power increase. Mark of Fugitive, reducing the cooldown time so I can get my 100% crit chance stun a snipe shot off. So with this on, I'm able to charge up full, and this buff will give my team members more damage by 5%, 6, 7, 8 for 2 seconds. So as long as you're on comms or timing your skills properly, they can get an additional 5% extra damage, plus the other 3, so an 8% extra damage for 2 seconds. 2 seconds is not a big window, but if you're timing debuffs correctly with your party members, you can pretty much get an additional 5% damage increase. So every little bit helps, pretty much. Going on the right side, Poison Arrow, stacking Venom for those dot effects. This allows us to stack up to 3 times and increases the chance of it actually stacking more than one stack. So usually, from my testing, it usually stacks 2 almost every time. PvP does about 1 to 2. It's a chance. So moving down the line, Focus Fire is your other main skill when your snipe is on cooldown. This will allow us to charge up seven arrows, but also stack that Venom. I'm going the Venom route in this build, primarily because I think the dot over time effect is more efficient for damage output, rather than me hitting an additional 20% extra damage. While I might be doing more damage in that short period, I think the Venom stacking will help the group kill a boss or a mob faster in the long run. But it's preference. If you just prefer damage, let's just go damage. So this is my group setup for skills for this tactic one. Jumping into my non-chain, there's a lot of possibility here. I've seen people use locate to increase damage, to increase your movement speed so you can move faster. I'm not a big fan of it, so I don't really use it. We have our dodge, typical dodge movement so we can get out of things. Our AoE knockup does a decent amount of damage to help control too much aggro. Our smoke bomb, this is going to give your entire party a buff. So this is going to increase our damage for the party by 15%. So this is 10, this is 15, and this reduces the concentration of the skill down because it does cost so much. So it's 30 concentration instead of 50. It still does have a long reuse for 90 seconds, but if you get a bow with the correct bonus on it, you can reduce it down even more. So this is just, you time it, get your 2 mages with you, or you and a mage, or you and another archer, and you cycle it. You can increase all your damage pretty high for 15% plus the buff on the paladin. And the final one for the party buff is our high angle fire. Switching this over to the party skill, this will give your party buffs, your party another 15% damage. It doesn't show the additional 7%, so I'm not sure if it's a bug or how it works out here. It does say 20 meters here, which is kind of interesting because it decreases it by 5 conditions. So I think it's a bug somewhere in this, but when I turn it on, it actually says 10 meters. So increases damage dealt to enemies 10 meters away by 15%, and that's for your entire party. So that's one of the biggest things for what we can do as a archer for our team and buffing the team, the members of the team damage upwards, especially if you're running 2 mages and no Zerker. So now you can take those 2 mages, increase the damage by 15% on top of the smoke bomb for their final chain. That's another 15% damage on top of the paladin. So this is the easiest way to increase your damage output for your party as a ranger. And you can do this with just rangers, and the rangers can kind of cycle it in as well. I haven't tested out if you had 3 rangers and they all popped on. If they all turn on acrobat enhancement, do we all get a stack of enhancement? Because that is a quite of a possibility. If we do, it's kind of hilarious in my opinion. But that's a possibility. Going into the second tactic, um, in second tactic, this one's more my PvP setup where I want to one-shot those guys, but I want to have some mobility as well. It's your typical marksman sniping tactic. We're gonna have, in this case, I'm still going to increase damage route. Prudent shot to increase my acceleration output. This one's kind of iffy. There's still stuff I can change on this. There's always things I can maneuver around to do better. But this is just preferences right now. Reducing movement speed on my penetration shot, increase in crit rate. So on my rapid fire, I'm critting more often in PvP. That's more helpful. The root for binding arrow, 3 seconds unable to move when it actually does land. I like it. Helps me kite better, especially in the 1v1 scenarios. Um, enhancement, it's one of those weird skills. I kind of just buffed it. I don't recommend it. Into the sniping tactic, it's the same style. We're going to reduce that physical defense stack. We're going to get our prudent shot so we can increase our fighting power dramatically up. And in this case, we can go down the vengeful arrow and spinning arrow pass, or we can go right into that snipe shot and get our crit, our 100% crit chance on to the enemy that we're facing. We increase the damage by 5% when we hit them with max damage, our max power. So in this case, if we use this to increase our damage output and get off our snipe tactic, we can do some decent damage, but the power increase from prudent shot is not actually enough. It takes the time for 3 seconds and charging is too short. So more or less, you're gonna use if you want to use this buff for fighting power damage, you want to go down the spinning arrow side, and you'll get more damage output that way. The other side of here is the poison arrow, stacking that venom chance up to 2, and then increasing skill damage for your focus fire. That's primary. Your 2 primary skill cycles is going to be focus fire, rapid fire, and if you need a crit hard, 6, 7, or 8,000 damage, you're going to go into snipe, and snipe is going to be that hit, that one shot kill setup. And you can of course buff this by reducing cooldown instead of doing this thing. Get rid of that, increase cooldown. You can increase this until damage taken. I don't think it's really necessary in PvP. While it helps with everybody focusing one person, more or less if you're focusing that one person, they will probably die in anyway. So I won't really recommend wasting points too much on that. Instead of the damage here, you can increase your range. It's only about 4 meters for 20. It's up to you. I personally don't think it's worth it. I would rather upgrade the damage and go down this route here with my fatal arrow and penetration shot to help slow whoever I'm facing. If it's a Zerk or a Guardian or Pally charging me, I'd rather go this route, slow them down so they can't catch me, and continue to kite. But this build is heavily built around they're ignoring you, you're able to get shots in and charge up and not have too many problems where you're waiting for them to just dive you. So I got the stun shot. This sadly is not working correctly. It does stun for about 2 seconds, but this buff is still buggy. So if you don't really want to increase your cooldown, don't even buff this, just keep it static. And that's just an interrupt skill. You have your dodge move, of course. There's a dodge. Your gravity control. I just feel like this is one of the more fun skills because if you drop it on yourself, when somebody like a mage, guardian, or any melee, they come next to you, just drop that right on top of yourself because they're gonna run right into it and knock them right up. And it does decent damage. It's not like it doesn't really do no damage or anything like that. And it does give you the ability to then start your cycle or get your ground bearings when you're fighting. And again, your high angle fire this time, it's more or less focused on you and nothing else. So this increases your damage by 40%. So we have and we reduce it from 20 meters away. So 25% damage to enemies 20 meters away. We increase it by 5, another 5, and another 5. So this way we are able to shoot pretty far and increase our damage by our max amount of as possible. It says 20 meters again. I'm pretty sure it's a bug. Last time I checked, this was actually it was actually 15. So, and the final thing we're going to look at is my fun build. So the fun build, in my opinion, is still focused attack tactic and marksman tactic. These two are just a blast. So the first thing I did was I buffed my range, and I'll show you why here in a second. We have our increased attack power after using maximum power, because that gives us a damage increase of fatal arrow, and that also increases our penetration shot. So now we can slow anything we're facing by 25%. I didn't go to 30%. I don't think it's needed. And everything I'm doing here, it revolves around you having the static amount of sapphires. If you have more, then hey, congrats. If you don't, this will work for you. The other standard, the standard attack, you have your rapid fire just to get those crit shots off. You have your binding arrow to root anything you're facing. So if you're PvP or even PvE, this build will work for you. So you can root and keep kiting. Switching over to the focused attack tactic, one of the things this gives us is the increases crit hit rate of all last chaining skills. So going into our skill sets, we have retreating shot, which we have two options here. We can go down to our focus fire, charging up to 7 arrows again and shooting normally. But the primary skill that I focus on here is the spinning arrow, which knocks down the enemy, and then after being knocked down, slows them for an additional 15%. You can of course buff this up, but I prefer just to, minimum is better, so I can move around my skill sets, my points, my first sapphire. So retreating shot, this comboing with marksman tactic to increase the range of retreating shot, because it's only 10 meters, which is pretty close. So in this case, let's buff up the range by 2 or 3 meters, and we'll be able to do that. You can buff the movement speed or reduce movement speed, but it's 2 seconds. I didn't think it was really worth it. But it's up to you. If you preference, to have it be able to move and maneuver faster, that's more your style. But the spinning arrow knockdown is pretty fast. Hit that. Coming into our second setup here, I don't really focus anything on this skill set because the snipe is too long. But if you can press the snipe skill, get off the mark of Fuji, which again you want to increase the range on, from the marksman piece, you have precise aim. What this will do is increases your damage by 10% for 5 seconds, but it also increases the available skill count by 1. So now we have increasing last time by additional 4 seconds on top of that. So it's 9 seconds of skill damage increase. In this case, we can jump over to marksman tactic and do either prudent shot down to snipe or prudent shot into our penetration, or we can go the normal route with rapid fire, increasing our damage by another 10%. It's really up to you and how you want to play that out. You don't guarantee crit, but if we play our cards right, with the focus growth effect, we get an additional 20% on our last chain skill. So in this case, we get our chain hit skill, we switch over, we have 20% chance to crit with snipe on top of our already crit rate. Pretty solid. And this side over here, this precise aim gives you a 5% crit chance. You can't really increase, you can increase this by 1 second if you wanted to. I didn't really mess around with this too much. You can go into multiple scenarios here, but the damage here wasn't too great in my opinion. I just use it for the 5% crit chance and kind of use this as like a buffer in case I'm in trouble or just need to chain a skill for some reason, if I'm in a mass PvP or if I'm fighting a 1v1 and I run out of my combos or I miss. So going to non-chaining abilities, we have our dodge move again. Again, sniping. This is not really working. Again, you don't have to buff this. You can just keep it as an interrupt. You can go barrage if you're fighting a lot of mages, well, primarily. Then go barrage and increment the magic absorb shield. This will prevent that damage from hitting you, but it does increase the cooldown time. Otherwise, projectiles is only really for so far what I could tell, it's for the shield from like from a guardian and shots from a ranger. So it's kind of weird. They have a lot of fixing to do on that. Gravity control again, I just like the skill. And our smoke bomb, the point of the smoke bomb is to give me that increased dodge rate. So it gives you a 15% dodge already on top of an additional, we have an additional 15 on that. So that's 30% extra dodge. It does increase the amount it costs to cast, but if you're in trouble and your stuff's on cooldown, you need to have the RNG chance of winning. Pop the smoke bomb, run around inside it, and you get that extra dodge rate. So this way you have a chance of winning just by dodging. All my abilities are the same. There's nothing unique about them. Sadly, I want to see this to be increased and kind of make it better. But right now, this is the generic build that that pretty much every ranger is using. Uh, it's just common sense from what just reading the skills. You have your crit damage, you have your crit hit, and you have your fighting power increase. You have your dodge rate or resistance. I go dodge. HP, agility, agility, fatality. It's pretty straightforward. All my tactics use this exact setup. Again, it's your choice. If you prefer something else, then try it out, see if it works for you. If it does, awesome. So that's all three of my tactics. I will have some videos coming out here in the near future on playstyles, PvP, and PvE. And I hope if this video helped you in any way or helped you understand some of the ranger skill sets, make sure you hit that like button. And of course, hit that subscribe button for any new notifications and new videos that come out. Thank you for watching. And like always, take it easy.